Welcome, everyone, to episode 108 of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. I am one of your hosts, urban pioneer Jared Hornbeck, and of course, I am coming to you from none other than Comet Valley, which is located in Brooklyn, New York. Now, my co-host for the show is Steve Guntley, and, you know, I meant it when I said it, that his smile just lights up the room.
Oh, shucks. Oh, golly. Well, I've got a funny rock I want you to take a look at, so that's what I'm bringing to this table. This is the podcast about tree jizz, flashlight suits, and double headers. That's because this is the podcast about Seedpeople and Shrieker, two full moon movies that answer the immortal question, what in the ding-dong heckamadoodle is that? And we are joined by an amazing returning guest coming back to the show to once again talk about some crazy movies here. Who is joining us today, Jared?
Yeah, well, you know what? We subjected him once to a triple feature of, I was going to say low budget. It would be no budget Tim Kincaid movies.
Yeah, they wish they had a budget.
Yeah, he was such a good sport about it because he's someone who you could see talking about sort of like the most extreme, obscure movies in any horror documentary, like In Search of Darkness. Always like the person they're talking to about the thing that no one else wants to talk to. So we said, let's bring him on to talk about Seedpeople and Shrieker. It's Jed Shepherd, also the co-writer and director of Host. Is it both of those, Jed?
Co-writer and exec producer of Host.
Got it.
There we go.
Yeah, Host is so good. I took the opportunity after we recorded the first time because we had talked about it a little bit, and I was like, man, I remembered watching that during the pandemic, but it's been a few years, and I went back and revisited it, and it's so much fun. So we're really happy to have you back.
Oh, thanks. And you know, I'm a glutton for punishment, so I'm happy to be back. And I was saying before you press record, this is one of my favorite podcasts that I've discovered in the last year because you know, I go on quite a lot of horror podcasts, and they're always about the most obvious films. And you know, I like talking about things that other people or other podcasts aren't talking about. So to have a full moon podcast just gives me the opportunity to rewatch or watch for the first time the most obscure, weird movies that are forgotten. You know, the really scraping the bottom of the barrel sometimes, but also, as I was saying, you could unearth some amazing gems as well. Which,
we absolutely can. And I'm not going to go so far as to say the two films that we've unearthed this week are in the gems category, but I did genuinely enjoy my time with both of these, and I think they both have kind of a lot to discuss and to recommend on them. So I'm glad you brought these two together, and I think they actually kind of fit together. Despite there's no
in a weird way,
there's no real connective tissue between these two movies other than occasionally I flip them in my head and forget which one is which. But like there's really no connective tissue other than they are just kind of two sort of undersung full moon movies from various eras. Like Seedpeople is from like the classic original era of full moon. And in that regard, it's one of the last movies that we're going to be talking about from that era. And then Shrieker comes from almost all finished. Yeah. And then Shrieker comes from the Kushner-Locke era, which we have become kind of big fans of because this is like the budgets are dwindling, but the imagination is spiking, and they're coming up with some really weird ideas. And they're really kind of Shrieker in particular is kind of a major everything in the kitchen sink sort of idea, which we will get into, of course. But I think we should plant the seed first. I think we should talk about Seedpeople, which was released May 28th, 1992. It's directed by our old buddy Peter Manoogian. It's written by Jackson Barr. And it stars Sam Hennings, Andrea Roth, Dane Witherspoon, Bernard Cates, Holly Fields, John Mooney, and Anne Betancourt. So we are welcoming back, of course, Peter Manoogian, the journeyman behind a number of Full Moon and Empire films.
Wait, now, Steve, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but did I miss you say Sonny Carl Davis?
Oh, I did. I'm sorry.
How
dare I? How dare I not include Sonny in there? Yes, a very small part for Sonny Carl Davis, but we do need to pop up. Like we need to shout him out every time he pops up. But yeah, Manoogian, he's kind of a mainstay of this, especially of this early era. The film, he was hired on in early 1992 by Charles Band to direct 2 films, which he pretty much shot back to back. The first one and they came out, I think, just a few weeks apart from each other.
Very
too.
Close, yeah.
The first one was in March of 92, which of course is Demonic Toys, which we've covered many times. And the second is this film, which was released in May. Now, there's not a lot about either of these movies today in our go-to resource book, which is, of course, Dave J's book. It came from the video aisle. Shout out once again. But yeah, so there's not a whole lot about either of these movies. But in that book, they did get an interview with Peter Manoogian where he cops to the fact that, yes, he understands this movie is an Invasion of the Body Snatchers riff. I wouldn't say it's like a full ripoff, but it is definitely playing with some of those ideas and just kind of inserting a little bit of Charles Band Tiny Terror action into it. But yeah, I didn't really have a whole lot about the making of this or about the construction behind it. I think it's just kind of a fun, small movie. I think everybody involved in it is kind of like, yeah, you know, we probably could have done a little better if it did come out, you know, if we'd had another week or 2 to shoot on this, but like, we're fine with what we made. And like, that's kind of where I'm coming down on it too. Like, this is a fun little movie. It's got some distinctively gross special effects, especially in how the seed people themselves populate or take over bodies and stuff. It's very very sexual imagery going into some.
Well, you know, we have Jed back, and it's kind of funny that like there are some parallels between that and like Breeders.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, there's a little bit of that. And so I watched this movie a couple of weeks ago at this point, like just to kind of get ahead of things, which is simultaneously maybe a mistake, but also like it's making my notes kind of fun because I'm looking back through my notes and I don't super remember what some of these comments are tied to. So of course I do have what the ding dong heckamadoodle is that. I remember that eternally because that's just, man, talk about putting some mustard on a line reading. Like that guy was given that line, it was on the paper, and he delivered the hell out of it. But I also made some notes here. Pretty effective, Crazy Ralph. Creepy vibe with the underage girl. And then, okay, my favorite, Brain in a Jar, Old Apple II, Tarps, Drawing of Tentacles. This is my retirement vibe. So that's I don't remember what exactly that's tied to. It's like a
tone poem.
It's a tone poem, exactly. And that's what I want to retire into.
So Jed, let me ask you, were you, you know, you sort of, I feel like you sort of half spun the wheel and half picked these with some background knowledge because you, I mean, you know, we've been doing the show now. This is episode 108. A lot of the real heavy hitters. I mean, we're getting into kind of where, like Steve mentioned, the classics Full Moon is going to be gone really soon. There's some Kushner Locke era stuff, but then there's a lot of Tempe era and beyond that's left for us to cover. But then there's also like, you know, Moonbeam and your Evil's Bong, however many of those are remaining in some Ginger Dead Man movies, etc. And you know, but then there's also all of the like Sybil Richards, like uncredited executive producer Charles Band stuff. So this one is kind of like there's a fan base for this one out there. It falls right into the classic era Full Moon. It's been remastered. It's on the Full Moon app in a gorgeous transfer.
Yeah,
absolutely gorgeous transfer. Had you seen this one before you picked it for the show?
Yeah, but many moons ago. I don't know if I mentioned it on the last one, but I was a massive, I guess I still am, a massive Charles Band fan. Massive. I collected absolutely everything. But then he kind of pissed me off quite a lot, like about a decade ago, where he found all of those video cases in a warehouse and tried to sell them off as you know, vintage when I believe they're brand new. And like, so I feel like he, you know, because I collected all the Wizard stuff and you know, a lot on VHS and stuff. I think he was being disingenuous to make a bunch of money with his fans, so that kind of like angered me a little bit. But yeah, according to Letterboxd, which is, you know, my go-to to remind myself if I've seen something, I had seen Seedpeople, but I didn't remember a single thing about it. And I rewatched this, about a week ago, and I almost still don't remember anything about it.
That's kind of where I'm at. Yeah,
it's crazy. I think it's because it's like a patchwork of other films, so it's difficult to kind of make it stand on its own because it's so reminiscent of about 5 different movies from the era.
Yeah.
There are moments. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh no, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. No.
Sorry, I just had to get a throat clearing in there. No, I was just gonna say it's an interesting. Like I was watching it and being reminded of certain things, and I realized watching it that I will sort of get behind a Body Snatchers story, no matter what the budget, no matter whether it's derivative or it's an interesting new idea or fresh in any way. I kind of just dig a Body Snatchers story, and I love, I like the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers with Kevin McCarthy quite a bit, but I love Philip Kaufman's Body Snatchers from the 70s with Donald Sutherland. I truly love that movie. But then there were like moments where their stuff is happening, and I'm watching it and I'm like, okay, I see what they're going after here. And then it's like, man, you know what I really love? Critters. It's like
I wrote that too.
Like I'm like tumbleweeds like roll around in like a rural setting. Like I'm like, Stephen Herrick's Critters. Love that movie.
Yeah.
There's even really silly ones that it made me think of, like the guy who directed both Pieces and Slugs, Juan Piquer Simon. He directed the movie, I think it's called Extraterrestrial Visitors. It was originally like a French language or Spanish language, probably Spanish language, but then it was put out by I forget the company that did this, but they would just like reissue movies with new titles as Pod People. And it went on to become a really funny Mystery Science Theater episode with Trumpy the Alien.
That's the one with Trumpy, right? Oh God.
And then there's moments
Trumpy,
where
you're bad at things.
Trumpy, you could do stupid things. That's one of my favorites. And that's then there's moments too where I realized, like, as a kid, I was always drawn to sort of like gooey cocoons in movies. Probably explains my huge affinity for Hume Cronin. But
yes, of course.
But like, no, I would love the scene in Gremlins when they're transforming and Billy finds them in his room in the pods. Like, I always love that. And this has like just enough of those references to like dangle that carrot in front of me and to be like, yeah, you know what? I'm kind of down with what they're doing here, because it is so like reminiscent of stuff that I really enjoy. And you get a John Carl Buechler creature design on these little Seedpeople, and they look a little shoddy in some shots, and then they kind of look cool and effective in other shots. And they're clearly the same creatures that were used in some capacity in Bad Channels, because they were shot around the same time.
There's definitely some similarities, but I actually did like the designs of the Seedpeople too. And that's like, this doesn't go full pod person, because like, they do duplicate people, but they do also have their own little creatures that are sort of taking the forefront most of the time. But I marked down that they kind of look like, it's sort of like low budget kaiju, they've got a little, a little bit. Like the Guyver or something like that. Yeah, exactly. Like they have that kind of energy of sort of like a maybe going to a Gwar show and seeing like people in little costumes like wrestling. That's kind of the vibe they gave me, and I'm like, this is fun.
Talk about getting covered in a white substance.
Go to a
Gwar show. That's going to happen. It's like maybe they shared supplies with the crew of Seedpeople. What I like about Seedpeople too, or at least the Seedpeople themselves, and this is sort of like the reverse Ghoulies. Like, I lamented the fact that in Ghoulies, I remembered as a kid when I first saw it, thinking that all the Ghoulies were going to look like Fish Ghoulie or Toilet Ghoulie. And then when they didn't, being really disappointed. Here, I like the fact that the Seedpeople have somewhat descript differences, like there's names like Shooter and Tumbler. It's almost like differentiating, I talked about Gremlins already, but it's like differentiating like Stripe from the rest of the Gremlins. I like that they're not exactly the same, and you can kind of tell them apart a little bit, because the Critters, if I remember correctly, they all basically kind of look the same. Oh, and how
Yeah,
dare
for the
I?
most
How
part.
dare I forget Rick Sloane's hobgoblins in
Oh,
this
how dare
discussion?
you. I mean,
yeah.
I love a little knockoff Gremlin, and like that's sort of what Full Moon kind of made their stock in trade for a long time, and I think these are pretty good ones. I don't know, we've seen so many of these tiny terrors at this point, but like I don't know, I think these guys, they have enough variety in them too. We've got the little flying guy, and we've got kind of a tentacly guy, and then we just got and it's all clearly like an extra like walking around on his hands, and like dragging around, like tightening himself up into this little ball and walking around, but it works and it's pretty fun. I want to shout out a couple of oh yeah, go ahead.
I think they used an amputee for that. Apparently,
I wouldn't be surprised.
For one of the creatures, yeah.
yeah, that's definitely a classic movie trick to be doing that. But I want to shout out a couple of cast members here. It's not like a huge cast, but there's a few interesting people in here. Dane Witherspoon, who plays Brad Yates, did not have much of a career, but mostly he's notable because he is the first husband of Robin Wright. He was married to her during like the Princess Bride years, and they were married very briefly. Sam Hennings, who plays our lead here, is like a working character actor, very solid. He's aged into one of those like very kind of leathery, like tough old Texas guys who I really love. He was really good in a new movie that came out just last year called Caddo Lake. If y'all haven't seen that one, cool little like time twisty thriller with Dylan O'Brien. Good movie.
Yeah, I like it.
And the only other one I want to shout out here, because I just learned this looking at it just now, is Holly Fields, who plays Kim in this. I mostly know her as a voice actress because she played the Black Cat in the Spider-Man 2 video game, which I played ton. And I just remember I just remember thinking like, wow, that woman has one of the best like sexy voices I've ever heard in my life. And I had no idea who played her until just now. So Holly Fields, great Black Cat voice, great like sexy villainous lady voice. But that's kind
also interestingly, according to the Video Zone, she was like playing a 13-year-old.
Was she?
Apparently so, yeah.
Which would have been
25.
Yeah.
25.
So that's a swing. That's a swing if you're playing a 13-year-old at 25.
But she was wearing a cap, so that makes her look younger.
Oh yeah.
The Lori Petty School of Acting.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I want to give a shout out to Bernard Cates, who played Doc, because he was so familiar to me, and I didn't know where it was from. But he's in an episode of Star Trek: Next Generation, which I just rewatched. It was called Phantasm, or Phantasms. But yeah, his face was so familiar. And I think
he plays Freud. He plays Sigmund Freud in that episode. That's funny.
Yeah, and like I guess he plays Docs a lot. Then I guess that's his thing.
Well, he's doing his best Russ Tamblyn as Dr. Jacoby in this.
Oh, he really is. Yeah.
Yeah,
he's my favorite character. I want to see
fun.
him in other movies because, like, I love it in these films when you have a small town and you've got this like crazy guy who knows too much. And
I thought you were talking about Russ Tamblyn for a second. I was like, he has been in other movies, a lot of them. He was in West Side Story with Richard Beymer, who was Ben Horne in Twin Peaks. They were both a jet and a shark, I believe. They might have been the same one. I don't remember. But I always found that to be a really odd connection that show had.
Yeah. David Lynch really loved West Side Story. But I'm seeing here that Bernard Cates was in Judgment at Nuremberg, the original Stanley Kramer like classic epic film. So yeah, no, he had a really long TV career going back to the early 50s, and he retired shortly after this. He lived until 2010, but I think this was kind of at the tail end of his career. But yeah, I thought he was very good. The structure of this movie is a little odd because I was not really sure who the protagonist was for a long time. It kind of keeps going back and forth between Sam Hennings and Dane Witherspoon, who, not to be rude, they kind of like look the same to me. And so I was losing track of like which one was which at any given point. And the movie's a little dark and it's a little washed out at times. So it's like it's hard to clock exactly what's happening.
Yeah,
but
I
like,
hate to be so reductive, but there are times when I'm like, okay, like which nondescript man is that? Which blonde
right.
woman is that? Like,
Yeah, you know, and so that's kind of a problem that this movie has. And I think it came out sort of sandwiched in between a couple of like much more notable full moon movies, you know, like Demonic Toys alone kind of just like up a lot of like the fan service around this time. So this one definitely kind of got lost in the shuffle. And unlike a lot of the other movies that got kind of lost in there, it doesn't seem to have retroactively found like a big fan base. But I don't know. I think this is solid. Like, I agree. I think anytime there is a pod person sort of arc, I'm on board. Like, I love that as a horror trope, and I'm like, I'm into it, even if it's not like the greatest example of all time. And but I mean, the cast is solid. I think the monsters are creative, and this thing moves. You know, like this thing is really pretty swift and entertaining. And there are a lot of full moon movies that do drag in the middle, and I don't think this was one of them. Like, I was consistently entertained.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of movies that are about 70, 75 minutes, and luckily the two movies that we were talking about today are around around the same. But like, I think it is very reminiscent of not just you know, Invasion of Body Snatchers, but Toby Hooper's Invaders from Mars.
Sure, yeah. Why did I leave that one out? Damn it! I hand my card in.
That movie. No, that was one of the first movies, or I guess horror movies I ever saw. I'm obsessed with Invaders from Mars. And the vibe of Seedpeople just reminded me of Invaders from Mars. But can I just mention that one of the kind of cons of this film is that they don't really explain a lot, but they also are not consistent with the powers and the progression of the monsters. Like, it's hard to, you know, I like watching a horror movie where at the start you get to know the rules of the universe, and you get to know what these creatures can do. But I feel like they just threw the kitchen sink at it, like you mentioned, because I don't understand the capacity of these creatures' powers and what they do and their aim, and it's. I'd like to have had a little bit more direction to what this is all about.
I agree with that. Yeah, it is. It is a little vague, like, because ostensibly, like, a pod person story is usually like taking over the earth, right? It's seeding your way through society and kind of like creating enough imposters until like you're the majority, and then you just kind of rule the planet. They didn't really seem to have those designs. They might just be like space perverts, you know. They might just be like, I'm gonna leave this weird tree in here, it's gonna jizz on you, and then you can move on with your day. Like,
I'd have to check, Steve, but I think Space Perverts might be a Charles Band movie that's in pre-production right now.
Look, TM. I want to capture that title. I want us to be writing that movie. Yeah, obviously, we're the guys for that one. But no, Seedpeople is pretty fun, and it really does it as kind of like a last gasp for our classic era full moon. We have a few like Moonbeam films from that era, and there's a couple that like stride the line, like Head of the Family, that we still need to talk about. I think that one is technically a Kushner lock in release, but it was a full moon in production. So you know, there were a few kind of stragglers, but this is kind of closing out what I think a lot of fans think of as like the full moon classic era, for us at least.
There were a number of kind of smaller movies mixed in. Like, you had your Demonic Toys, which was a big one at that time. This is coming on the heels of Dollman, which is kind of a well-regarded one. But then you have also, probably around the exact same time as this one, I think another Peter Manoogian one, actually. It was Netherworld. Did Peter Manoogian do Netherworld?
I think he might have. Yeah, I don't remember exactly.
Because I think we you know, and that's kind of one too where it's like, again,
no, it's a Schmoller.
Schmoller. I get them confused sometimes, the two of them, but that was a David Schmoller. Okay, but like, you know, it's kind of plays around with these tropes and these familiar things that you've seen before and homages to other films and stuff, but they just feel smaller scale. Like, yes, Demonic Toys is not wholly successful, and it's not wholly original, but it at least introduces these like original characters that would then endure in Full Moon, because we get that god awful sequel, but then you get like some of the more recent ones that have worked pretty well, like the Baby Oopsie movies or Jack Attack, which are surprisingly enjoyable. But I just think like this falls into that category of like it's probably never really listed as like movies people remember that fondly from the classic Full Moon era. To me, I think the thing that's most interesting about it was the Seedpeople sequel that we never got, which was reading about how Dave Parker and Jay Wolfel were going to be working on a sequel to this movie, and they seemed super into what that was supposed to become. Apparently, the script that was written for it by their standards was really good. It was going to be picking up right where it left off in the vein of Halloween 2 and something like that. But apparently, you know, it says that one of the main influences was Peter Jackson's Brain Dead, so it was supposed to be much gorier, apparently.
Nice.
Oh, beautiful. I'm sorry, that's a Dead Alive mug.
Excuse me. So sorry. So sorry. I'm still pissed that they changed the title of that. Brain Dead is just such a better title.
Yeah.
It is. But I felt like that was such kind of a missed opportunity. But I mean, we talk about this all the time, because when you're bound by these budgets and time constraints, it's like you have these ideas, and sometimes it's like if they take too long to gestate, they just get tossed by the wayside. Like we've talked about the proposed Puppet Master trilogy that never happened, and then there's other proposed sequels to things. I mean, Bride of Head of the Family has been in talks for how many years? Actually, it's funny. Bride of Head of the Family is in the video zone, mentioned in the video zone for the next movie we're going to talk about in this episode, as being something that was like supposed to be coming out the production year of 1998. We're now, 27 years later, and we still have not gotten Bride of Reanimator. So, I mean, by reading, whether it's the autobiography or it's It Came from the Video Aisle or Confessions of a Puppet Master, any of those things, there's always like, well, we had an idea to do this, and then, you know, we had to face reality in terms of time and budget and what we're on the hook for. And that, to me, that's one of the more interesting things of Seedpeople, was that it could, like, had it turned into a franchise, and maybe they could have even they could have done the Critters thing. It's like Seedpeople 2 could have, taken place, I don't know, it would have been right where this left off. And Seedpeople 3 could have been in LA, and Seedpeople 4 could be in space.
Yeah.
But we don't get any of that, unfortunately.
You could do it.
I think it's hard to have sequels to a movie, again, where they don't really establish the rules of the creatures. Like, you know, if you think of Gremlins, the rules are stated like in the first 2 minutes, and then so the audience kind of knows what to expect, and then they can subvert expectations, etc. But like in this, they're meant to be scared of UV light because Doc Roller has his whole setup with the UV light. But literally, the sun like has UV light. So in the daylight, they would just all be, scared and running for caves or whatever.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make too much sense. And I feel like it must have been rushed, because anyone who took a glance at the script would have been like, well, actually, that doesn't make too much sense. We wouldn't be able to shoot in daylight if they were scared of UV light. But yeah. I would like to see a sequel or even a remake.
Yeah. This fits. There are a lot of movies from like this kind of mid '92 run of Full Moon movies that would really benefit from like a big budget remake. Like, I think those are the movies you should always be remaking. I fully believe that. It's the movies that like have potential or like have some cool ideas, but maybe we're limited by budget or time or a couple of whatevers. So I think this is a good candidate. I think Doll Man, is an amazing candidate. I think you could make $100 million like Doll Man movie that is like crazy fun. And I think you can really do something with that. But
yeah.
One last thing I wanted, before we segue movies, that I want to point out about this one was there was one other like reference, or maybe it wasn't a direct reference, but it was definitely something that made me think of another movie, which was besides when they're getting shot with like their white liquid, when they were getting shot with like corn pops, basically. Like it was making me think of Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
smiling anytime I'm thinking about Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Yeah.
Oh,
And we've run
absolutely.
into this problem of, no, I don't want to call it a problem, but we've run into this phenomenon a few times where some of our episodes were like breaking down some of these movies, and we're breaking them down to the parts of movies that they're kind of ripping off. And it's like, it's been just like naming references kind of for a while. But I think that's kind of where you have to fall with Seed People.
Yeah.
It's derivative for sure. And it's definitely, its influences are on its sleeve. But that being said, it is about 72 minutes long, and it goes by really quickly, and there's some cool creature designs. So like,
Absolutely.
there are worse ways to spend 72 minutes than being reminded of other fun creature features that you like.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's a good transition to talk about Shrieker. And this movie, it came out in March 3rd, 1998. It was directed by Dave DeCoteau. It's written by Benjamin Carr, which of course is a pseudonym for Neil Marshall Stevens, one of the most prolific writers in Full Moon. And it stars Tanya Dempsey, Jamie Gannon, Jenya Lano, Jason Shane Scott, Allison Cuff, Roger Crowe, Chris Boyd, and Perry Shen. This is the return to the show of Tanya Dempsey. We recently talked about her as the lead of Danny Draven's Deathbed, which I thought she was quite good in, and J.R. Bookwalter's Witch House 3, which she was also in. No, that's not being mean. I liked Witch House 3. But really, the only actor I recognize here outside of Tanya Dempsey is Perry Shen, who is still to this day a pretty prolific voice actor, character actor, but I recognize him as the lead of this movie from like, I think 2001, 2002 called Better Luck Tomorrow. Have either of you seen that movie?
No.
It's cool. It's the
Yes,
debut
yes.
film. Yeah.
I watched it with the intro from the director. In London.
Justin Lin. Yeah, it's the debut film of Justin Lin, who goes on to be a pretty big deal. And it's a really good little indie film about
I love it. Great movie.
Yeah, these overachieving like Asian American high school students who kind of form a crime ring and then get in over their heads. Like, I recommend that movie. He's the lead of it.
Cool.
He's quite good.
By the way,
check it out.
That movie is part of the Fast and Furious universe because they have that
Sung
shared
Kang.
character. Yeah,
they do. Yeah, that's kind of the debut of Sung Kang, and like,
that's funny.
Yeah, and Justin Lin would do. Did he do 6 and 7, 5 and 6? I forget.
He did a few. I know that
he did a few of the Fast and Furious movies. And he's very solid. And he would also have Perry Shen would also have a role in Hatchet, the Adam Green movie. I believe he's the guy who gets his head ripped off like a toilet seat. Yeah,
I didn't even make that connection. I guess I didn't do much of an IMDb deep dive on him, because sometimes I'll kind of go through down that rabbit hole and see, have we seen this person before? Why do they look so familiar? He was not familiar to me, but that now that you say that, I'm like, yeah, it's been a while since I've seen Hatchet, but I do have, I won as a trivia prize once the Hatchet Blu-ray set. So I'll have to bust that out soon, because those movies are fun.
They're fun. Yeah. I only ever saw the first one, but I enjoyed it. Yeah.
I also think he is probably the best actor in the movie. He feels because we aren't, it's not a galaxy of stars, but he feels a lot more natural than the others. I find the other people seem a little bit forced.
A little, yeah. Well, and there's a lot of the classic Dave DeCoteau casting of like, let's see how good of cheekbones this man has before and then we'll see if he can read dialogue, And this movie is pretty fun because DeCoteau at this point is like, so we've covered this a lot, and Charles Band wrote about this in his autobiography, where a PA came to him one day and just said like, how's it going with Dave DeCoteau? He's just like, the movies are getting really gay. And, that's always been there. That's always been a part of his oeuvre, and it's always been kind of his vibe, but it was reaching a point where it was just getting like really kind of very obvious and was sort of overtaking everything. And I think around this era, he's starting to joke about it. So like we get the character, which I thought was one of the funniest bits. We get the character of Mike, who is introduced like shirtless, and the first line of dialogue out of his mouth is, "I'm not gay. You may think because I have short hair and a great body that I'm gay, but I'm not. I've slept with 17 women, 2 of them currently.
17 women.
Very specific, yeah.
The huge, like the front loading this defense before anybody says anything about it, I thought was really funny.
And everyone's just standing around like, what? Where
like,
did this come from?
You're like, we don't care, dude. Yeah, you're good. Yeah, we're fine. But I thought that was really funny. So yeah, this is part of this is kind of the beginning of an 11 movie run for DeCoteau, just like back to back. He was all over the Kushner-Locke era, which eventually culminated in the fairly universally loathed Killer Eye, which I have not seen yet. We'll get to it. But yeah, it's just kind of like going right into it. I will say, I think this is, and this sounds like a or a backhanded compliment, but this is one of the more cinematic DeCoteau movies we've watched in a while. His production values, you know, we've seen that he is a director who can actually pull something really cool off if he has a little bit of time and a little bit of budget. Like he directed Puppet Master 3, which is still maybe top tier Full Moon. You know, it might be the best movie in the entire catalog, at least of that era. So, you know, he can pull off something pretty cool when he's given a little bit of time. But at this point, when he's at the beginning of, like I said, an 11 movie run, I think he is starting to sort of lock into his thing, which is just, I work fast, I work cheap, I'm not going to overthink these things, I'm just going to get this movie out.
If I could speculate a little bit, I'm going to, like, this movie is very obviously comes on the heels of both you know, Dimension Films horror movies that follow Scream.
Yeah.
But then also sort of like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and
probably
not. Angel probably wasn't out at that time yet. This would have been like first to second season of Buffy when they were making this. And I think Dave DeCoteau felt like I can make a bunch of horror movies with young casts like this back to back. It seemed to him, I think, if I'm positing this here based on nothing other than having watched the movie and looking at DeCoteau's output during the time, that it would have been, I can make a bunch of Scream clones, or I can make a bunch of movies with young, attractive casts.
Yeah.
Maybe some of them with monsters, some of them maybe with human killers or something like that. And it just didn't quite work out. You know, this was the first in a long stretch of movies that DeCoteau did work on. And, you know, like you're saying, we start here and it has cinematic qualities. I mean, it's obviously very low budget. It is as standard as Def can get in a lot of ways. The funny thing is that I don't know what the reasoning for this was, but the trailer and behind the scenes footage in the video zone is clearer than the actual transfer of the movie.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there were scenes in the video zone when they're like explaining parts that happened, and I'm like, I don't remember that. And I'm like, wow, it's so much clearer. Everything was so sort of fuzzy and pixelated watching it. Even on the Full Moon app, it's probably the best version of it that exists.
Yeah.
But when you look then to something comparatively like the Killer Eye, there seems real no like artistic ambition or cinematic ambition with that. It's like, we're going to make this movie in a loft apartment in a weekend type energy. And so I can see what he was probably thinking getting started, but it did not culminate, unfortunately.
Well, this is a really odd, because you mentioned like it is kind of drafting off the Dimension era films, and for a while, and I think in some markets this movie is still called Shriek.
Yeah, in the UK.
Yeah, exactly. See, which does make it sound more like a Scream clone. This is in no way a slasher movie. Like we covered recently the movie Bleed, which was sort of the first attempt at a Full Moon like slasher movie, which also exposed the fact that like, oh wow, humans don't kill other humans in Full Moon movies, which is a weird thing we're never putting together until then. But yeah, does not happen often. But this was kind of marketed to that degree. But this is a much stranger movie than I was expecting it to be, because you see the cover and it's kind of a distinctive looking little monster, right? It's just kind of this gnarled guy who's got another face growing out of his face, and they've got like kind of a third shared mouth between them. Cool design. I will say this is one of those creature designs that looks better in a promo photo than it does moving. It's Yeah, and I think even to their credit, they recognize that and they use him a little sparingly. But this is a movie that feels like it's throwing in like kind of the cast off scraps of a lot of different films, right? Because we open with this hilarious, like,
so totally different than Seedpeople is what we're saying.
totally different from Seedpeople, which
Got
is
it.
purely original and driven by creative integrity. But this one, we open with this hospital scene where we think, okay, all right, this is a monster slasher film. And then we get into the credits and we start getting as you said, the sort of Buffy monologue where they're talking about ancient alchemists and prophecies. And I'm like, okay, I was not expecting this to be a prophecies movie. I was not expecting this to be ancient runes and old scrolls and stuff like that. And then we get into the plot proper, which is about 6 college students who are squatting in an abandoned hospital.
This is such a bizarre plot, this movie.
I'm like, let's hit pause on this because I want to see this movie. I want to see this movie.
We never
what's
saw that
happening with this.
hospital. We never saw that hospital properly. There's no establishing shots of the hospital. It just looks like, it looks like student union or something, or like just some rooms with some chairs in. It doesn't. We don't ever really see the hospital stuff.
No,
which is a real shame. We see the basement, I guess, with like stuff everywhere, but yeah, there's not much to call it an abandoned hospital, especially as it's got like bright lights, it's got furnishings, it's got plants. It's barely abandoned.
I mean, and there's so many fun things you can do with it, like in another Neil Marshall Stevens screenplay, 13 Ghosts, which is also kind of set in like an abandoned asylum hospital kind of thing. Like there's fun stuff that you can do with that, but it's just weird that this very, very strange setting for the movie is kind of like just taken as a given. It's like, oh yeah, of course, obviously, 20-year-olds are living in an old abandoned hospital together.
The 90s aesthetic of it, I started laughing when they kind of like announced that was the conceit of the movie, because it was very much like, oh yeah, this totally has like this is the true story of 7 strangers picked to live in a hospital and have their lives taped. Like that's how very the very, very late 90s in a lot of ways there. Lots of pointy sideburns and spiky hair on these gentlemen, on most of them. But this is a bizarre plot to the point where like there were elements of the plot that I understood, but I ask you, Steve or Jed, whoever wants to field this question, what is the plot of this movie? I still don't really know.
I'm not totally certain. Yeah.
I'll give it a go. I think that the abandoned hospital part is nothing to do with the actual storyline. I think they just wanted somewhere creepy to have this thing in. It could have been anywhere, but I believe it is about I'm not going to spoil it yet in case you want to keep it till the end, but it's about a person or people who are calling forth a creature that is older than time in order to get power for some unknown reason. But when you call upon that creature, you have to sacrifice other people's lives, and that comes in the form of writing strange symbols on a bit of paper and hiding it in their wallets and in their beds and stuff. It makes absolutely no sense. It would have been way better if it was you do a ritual, you call forth this monster, something goes wrong, and it just kills everyone. It's so convoluted to have the fact you've got to print out these symbols on a bit of paper and then hide it on them. It's,
And I knew that I wasn't crazy for feeling this way, because if you watch the Video Zone, Tanya Dempsey talks about how she got the script, was reading the script literally 2 or 3 days before shooting began. So she was trying to fully understand what it's about. And it makes complete sense also that like her character is basically there to absorb exposition.
Yeah.
And it's like, there was so many times where she's like, I don't understand what's going on. And I'm like, girl, I'm with you. I don't really know what this means either. Like,
and then you get a character
she's learning in real time.
She is. Yeah. And then every time she says that, then a character who shouldn't know that much gives them an exposition dump of, okay, well, this 13th century ritual does this. Like, how do you know this? Why would you know this?
You know, for a security guard, he had an awful lot of information.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the guy in the basement, whose only job it is to give exposition. Yeah, and then he dies like straight away as soon as he emerges from his lair. It's a strange movie, but I like this a lot better than Seedpeople. A lot.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like it makes no sense, and it's kind of nonsense, and it's ridiculous. But yeah, I did have fun watching this. Yeah, like I had a good time with it, and we didn't even mention that like in the final 2/3 of the movie, they introduce the Thing plot where it's like, now it's not just we're being hunted by something. Now there's one of us is secretly like working with this creature and is like sicking it on us, and now we have to figure out who it is, and it can't be me, so it must be one of you guys. So we're adding this paranoia element, and of course like one person's going to be wrong and it's going to get killed by mistake, and there's all of that stuff.
I don't know if I'm going to say this is a great acting performance, but I think it's an acting choice. One of the cast members, Thomas R. Martin, in this movie, who plays the character of Robert, who may or may not exist. This Robert, he is channeling his best Paul Rudd as Tommy Doyle
a little bit
in this movie.
Yeah,
and he's definitely giving it an energy. And I pulled him up on IMDb because I was like, oh, this guy looks kind of familiar, and I realized what it was. And this is kind of a silly reference, but he looks so much in some of his IMDb pictures like the guy who played Taco on The League. I don't know if you.
Also, John LaJoy, is that his name? Yeah,
John
okay,
LaJoy.
yeah.
He looks very, very much like him, but he seems to be, somebody who has consistently worked. He had bit parts on the X-Files and some other things, and he has a small part in the movie Coyote Ugly, and he just here and there low budget movies and stuff. He's the titular coyote.
He's the one.
But yeah, no, I mean, and one of my that's Sequest 2032. I don't know that one. I thought it said Sequest DMV for a second, and I was
was there a sequel series to Sequest, and somebody didn't tell me?
Wow. Okay.
1993. Oh no, that's weird. So
it is the same thing.
DMV. Listen to me, that sounds like torture. Sequest DSV is renamed Sequest 2032 because you pull it up and it is the one with Jonathan Brandis and Ted Raimi.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. I watch that show like live every week, and then apparently I stopped at a certain point, but because I don't remember when they renamed it to 2032. But yeah, I remember that talking dolphin, and I remember Roy Schneider. Yeah. Deeply silly movie or deeply silly show. Yeah, no, but Shrieker also, he walks through walls, like he can phase like Kitty Pryde, which is always funny. So he's got a lot of things, and ultimately he's kind of incidental to what's going on in the movie because obviously humans are the real evil ones. But I was never fully clear where I sat with this thing, but it was moving and it was funny and it was like, it's entertaining in a very kind of it's a minor work. It's definitely a minor work for Full Moon, but for David DeCoteau, it's a pretty major work. It's a pretty accomplished movie for him.
Am I right in thinking that the Shrieker can only kill you if you have those symbols on your person at the time?
I think that's correct, right? Because there's the great moment where the revealed traitor suddenly reaches around and feels that the symbols are growing on her back. I'm like, well, how are you feeling that? Like,
yeah, how are you feeling someone drawing on your back? Like,
right? Like, is there just an invisible guy with a magic marker behind you going like? But like,
no, it's an invisible guy with a tattoo gun giving her a tramp stamp.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but that was actually quite a good twist because this is the big bad. There's this girl. She has she has the symbols on her. She had to take her top off in order to show us, of course. But she had the symbols on her stomach, but she had the counter symbols on her back, which was a good twist. And then we get the not gay guy,
Mike, I think,
with the protection symbols on him. But then, and then how did they kill the Shrieker in the end? I'm trying to figure it out because they just put the bit of paper on the Shrieker but that doesn't instantly kill you. That should, because he's the one that does the killing, and he didn't kill himself. So I don't understand how the Shrieker died.
There's a real feeling in the last like 2 to 3 minutes of this movie of a like, let's wrap this up. Like there's no time for any sort of like reflection on how the movie ends. It's like the Shrieker is stabbed by the knife with the piece of paper in one of its faces. It falls down and dies, and then they walk away, and the guy says, "What did you ever see in that guy?" And it fades to black.
Yeah.
And it's like there's no they're not really concerned. It's like more like this is a full moon movie, so we're gonna have a 5-minute credit sequence. We got to keep this thing at 75 minutes.
Right.
Like wrap it up. Because I do wonder, sometimes when we watch these really short movies like this, I do wonder if these are, 70-page scripts, or if there is like stuff that they end up cutting because they want to keep the movie short. And I feel like this could have potentially been one where they made the mistake of cutting kind of necessary, at least dialogue exchanges, if nothing else. Because I wonder if this was an 85-page script and they just were like, well, we got to get it down to 73.
Well, they basically cut out all of the killings. Every time the Shrieker was going to kill someone, they just cut away, and you see the shadows, you see the after effects, but you don't actually see very often. Only maybe one time you see the Shrieker kill somebody. Even right at the end, it's just the person has their back turned, and the Shrieker swipes, and then the person turns around and they have splash marks. But maybe it's a budgetary thing. Like, you couldn't really have this big puppet, killing someone and it looking realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I do want to talk about the creatures for a second, though, because it is a design that's kept in the shadows a lot. It's sort of similar, reminded me of like Hideous, where like the monsters in Hideous were kind of kept in the shadows a lot. And then once they were, fully lit, they were, successful in some shots, less in others. But I think like kind of the same could be said for the Shrieker. And I think this is as good a time as any because he hasn't really come up in this capacity on the show. But the Shrieker design was by a special effects guy, Mark Williams. And Mark Williams, worked on that, and he's interviewed in the Video Zone for Shrieker, talking about how he thought the design was cool. The two faces, again, that's sort of right there is another homage to The Thing with kind of the two faces melted together.
Yeah.
And so, and they talk about some of the differences between the two faces, but, he waxes a little bit about like, oh, well, it would be cool to do another Shrieker movie because we could maybe even add a third face, or we can deviate from the design here. We can do some cool stuff. And he talks for quite a bit about how cool he thought that idea would be. Sadly, he would die only 2 months after this was released. So he never got the chance to do that.
Yeah, because I knew he died after this. Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but he's the guy. I mean, he did creature effects on Aliens. He did creature effects on The Fly. I mean, he had a real resume to himself. And sadly, only 2 months after this was released, he passed away and was only 38 years old.
Oh,
crazy.
Yeah. So I kind of got I was going back and rewatching some of the scenes of the creature design, thinking to myself, like, no, like it's a cool design in a lot of ways. It's got that cheapy creature feature kind of look to it where, there's charm sometimes to when you watch, an old 50s B movie and it looks like very rubbery and fake. And, you get that. And then you get times where it's lit, where it actually looks, menacing and looks like a pretty good effect. And then we did mention before, like how the hospital only really serves as a creepy setting. And I do think David DeCoteau uses it pretty well at times in this movie. I think there are a couple of good sort of like smoky alleyway or haunted shadowy hallway shots in the movie. Again, comparatively to see, starting here and trying to be a little more cinematic and then just seeing what the onslaught of demand and no time and money does to you. I'm sorry to keep harkening on The Killer Eye, but it's like there you don't see any of that in a movie like that, and that's one that even Jacqueline Lavelle herself cannot save.
Yeah, yeah. Well, she does her
I,
best.
I think the creature design I think is, you know, it's obviously reminiscent of like a Stuart Gordon or Yuzna, especially I just watched From Beyond and the creature in that. There's some similarities, but also to the substance. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the creature at the end of the substance. It's not too similar with the multiple faces. But you know, I don't think Shrieker's ever going to be like a full moon toy or anything, and
No.
I don't think it's unique enough to kind of justify that at all. But you know, one of the things I did find interesting was so this film came out in '98. The animated image of all the symbols kind of spinning around and coming together. And I was like, okay, that's quite impressive. But then I realized Jurassic Park came out like 6 years before, so like it wasn't that impressive to have those symbols
Right. Yeah.
rotating on a computer.
Right. Oh man, there's a scene in this where they're like filming a CRT computer monitor with like video, and it's just like flickering. Right. I was like, oh man, I have to look away from the screen until they're done with whatever fake Google they're using here, the university archives or whatever they were using. I'm like, oh man, that is hard to look at. But,
yeah, there's something charming though about any late 90s show or movie when someone is using the internet for something.
Mhm.
It's just like it always, it's so funny. It's like all of these like Angel Fire, GeoCities type sites that are popping up with like all of these terrible like menus and layouts, and I mean that's really where you get that, and I feel like it continued well into the 21st century in like your NCIS type procedurals. It's like always hilarious. It's like a one from like 2015, and it's like this most basic website where you're trying to find this like sex trafficker's secret like but brothel that he's running online or something.
Yeah. Well, I think we've put Shrieker fully to bed here. That a fun couple of movies to talk about. Like I've had a good time watching both and discussing both Seedpeople and Shriekers.
I will fight Jed to the death because I think that Seedpeople is the better of the two. Actually, no. You know what? This
is where the riff is coming from.
This is not. That's right. Yeah, you can see it in my. Once he said that he'd like this one more, my energy palpably changed. No, I think better is not the right descriptor. Like these aren't the kinds of superlatives we were going to hurl at movies like this. It's like there are things about Seedpeople that made me enjoy it more, and it had less to do with Seedpeople than it had to do with the movies it was aping.
Yeah,
and I think maybe I'm changing my tune actually mid-sentence. I'm very wishy-washy if you haven't noticed. I think there are. I really was kind of lost in the plot of Shrieker for the majority of it, but I'm just like, okay, I don't really fully understand what this movie is about. But I found I think this is probably one of Tanya Dempsey's first movies, if not her actual like first movie. It's definitely the first of the movies that we've covered with her in it. And it's like, this cast has that look, like it's almost like you can see them, arranged standing behind one another on a Dimensions film poster from 1999.
Yeah.
And again, DeCoteau does a couple of interesting things here with it. It just doesn't really fully work as a movie for me. But now maybe this, and I feel like maybe I'm getting wrong, but so this was 98 and it was Kushner Lock. But was this shot on film or was this shot on video?
It looks like video to me, but I can't be sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he tricks the eye. I think it was shot on video, but the aspect ratio is very cinematic, so it tricks you into thinking it's more lush than it actually is. It's the aspect ratio that makes you think it's film, but I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I find this one just to be a little bit lesser than like Hideous and what's the other one? Not Hideous, and then there was another one that came out around the same. The Creeps.
Oh yeah.
I find this is like a similar era. Like this probably came out less than a year after those two movies, and it just feels a little bit like a step down in quality, but there's still, some decent stuff to enjoy there.
Yeah, for sure. But we were so excited to have Jed back. Thank
Oh,
you
yeah.
so much for being back on the show and for talking about
Yeah.
these movies with us. It's
Anytime.
always a delight to see you. What do you have going on right now that you'd like to promote?
Well, since I last been on, I did a documentary called The Blair Witch Documentary,
Ooh.
which came out in the end of last year, November, on the Second Sight Blair Witch release. And that's a brand new transfer of the Blair Witch Project, direct from the High 8 tapes and the 16 mil. And this is for the first time it's ever been transferred directly from those, because the previous versions of the Blair Witch Project you've seen have been copies of copies, and that's why everyone thinks it's all scratchy and stuff. But the actual 16 mil is meant to be beautiful looking, and it is now. And straight off the High 8 tape as well, it looks like High 8 instead of like an artificial filter put on. So it's the most beautiful version of the Blair Witch Project. But then also I had access to all the raw footage of the Blair Witch Project, like 50 hours. Yeah, and I've had access to it for a long time actually, but I got to go through all of that footage. And all the behind the scenes stuff that they filmed at the same time, and it's never ever been released before. But so I basically cut all of my favorite parts of the footage, put it in this documentary. All my favorite parts of the behind the scenes, put it in this documentary. It's 2.5 hours, brand new interviews, never before seen.
Wow.
Blair Witch footage. Yeah, and it's blowing people's mind because it's one of the most successful horror movies of all time, and no one knew that there was so much extra stuff in the woods in the lead up to going to Burkittsville, in more interviews with the townsfolk, and all of that's there, and it's about how the ongoing legacy of the Blair Witch Project as well, and the films it's influenced and all that stuff. So that's the latest thing. I'm working with the Coppolas and Ed Sanchez of the Blair Witch Project on a project called the Horror Initiative as well, where we are trying to find the next big horror filmmakers and helping them along and giving them a bit of money to make short films, and then pitching that around town to make features. But it helps if you've got the Coppolas involved as well.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing now. I'm reading submissions and then we're going to make stuff.
That sounds incredible. I count me among the ranks of people who did not know there was that much extra Blair Witch.
I had no idea.
I had no idea. Yeah,
Yep.
That's so cool.
I'm
amazing.
sure if you check out that doc, I mean, a 2.5 hour documentary, brand new transfer, stuff like that. That would be the reason for me to revisit it. I honestly have not seen the Blair Witch Project in probably 20 years. Like I saw it in the theater, probably opening weekend, maybe even opening night. Watched it, I think, one time, maybe on DVD in the mid 2000s, and that's the last time I saw it. So it's due for a revisit from me, and this would be the time to do it. And I'm sure it's going to be pretty awesome. So I'm looking forward to that.
I'll send you a link.
Thank you.
I'll send you both a link to watch it if you want.
Oh yeah, no, I'd
for
love
sure.
To.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
And if you're a fan of the show and you've been listening to us every week, or if this is just your first time tuning in, well first of all, welcome. But if you want to keep up with us on the show, you can follow us on social media. Honestly, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky. If you just search the name of the show, you'll find us very easily. You can also email us at puppetmasterscastlefreaks@gmail.com. One thing we've been enjoying is people leaving Spotify comments. So if you're a Spotify listener, comment on the episode in real time, and we'll respond to you. And if you do really enjoy the show and you want to help it reach a wider audience, I would say rating and reviewing is probably one of the best things that you can do. So if you're willing to jump onto Apple Podcasts or Spotify and drop us that 5-star rating and maybe review, that would just help our visibility and help the show reach a lot of new people. And because as our audience continues to grow, we appreciate all of you who have taken the time to do that. But, we are not the only show that Steve would like you to rate and review. So, Steve, what else have you got going on?
Well, I've also got a show called Cinema Arcade. That's cinema and arcade mashed together. That is what we do on that show. We are watching movies and then playing the video games based on those movies to compare, contrast, see how they enhance or detract from each other. As we are recording right now, I'm getting ready to record our episode on Heavy Sigh, M. Night Shyamalan's The Last Airbender. Truly, to put this in context, we have watched Manos Hands of Fate for this show. I think this is the worst movie that we've covered for the show. I think The Last Airbender is the toughest sit that we've had so far. So we're going to be digging into that one. We've got a whole bunch of other weird stuff out there. We recently released an episode on City of Lost Children, which people had no idea there was a game to that movie. Very strange, cool movie to revisit. Lots and lots of fun stuff coming up on that feed. And we have some fun stuff coming up on our feed as well. Do. You're going to want to come back next week because we are continuing the Puppet Master saga. We've come on to episodes 6 and 7, which is Curse of the Puppet Master and Retro Puppet Master. So Dave DeCoteau is taking the reins once again. Actually, a lot of the same cast members from the movies we were talking about today are going to be popping up in these films, as well, of course, as Greg Sestero from The Room, who is the lead of Retro Puppet Master.
And the timing of it is funny too, because this was not on purpose, but in the video zone for Shrieker, Charles Band talks a lot about Puppet Master 6. He refers to it as Puppet Master 6, and then the footage cuts to says Curse of Puppet Master. But that was in production or post-production right around the same time as Shrieker. So surprising to no one, there's a big overlap of cast and crew working
as
on
always.
Those projects.
Absolutely. So tune in next week for that. Let's keep the Puppet Master series moving, and we will catch you all next time. So shriek. That
would have been a good place to end, but I was going to say, as we've been wont to do when it comes to any Puppet Master thing, we may or may not have a very knowledgeable guest.
Yes, we may.
Joining us again to talk about that. So just do with that what you will, people. And we will see you next time. Thank you again, by the way, to Jed Shepherd for taking the time to join us. And we will see you next week for Curse of the Puppet Master and Retro Puppet Master.